If you are interested in thinking about boundaries in a deeper way, a way that can actually work in your brain, life, and within your authenticity, then check out the new book, Setting Boundaries That Stick by Julianne Taylor Shore, LMFT, available wherever books are sold. Welcome, Season Sixers. As always, thank you for being part of our Color of Success podcast family. I'm your favorite host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Keep your eyes peeled for my brand new book coming out. It's called Cancel the Filter, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Subscribe to colorsuccesspodcast.com to be on our waiting list. Seats are limited and being filled as we speak. We're also streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the couch, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. Amy Yip is a somatic life transformation and mental fitness coach, keynote speaker, self-confidence trainer, and author of Unfinished Business, breaking down the great wall between adult child and immigrant parents. Her mission is to empower AAPI women to be seen, heard, and to effing rock the boat. Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really excited to talk all about everyone's favorite topic, fertility.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and to talk about that topic of fertility.
Well, I joke, but we are both mothers, and for a lot of my clients and women that I talk to in general, fertility is a difficulty that many have faced. And so I really like to explore some of your journey. And in my opinion, this is only my opinion, biology has not caught up to having women in the workforce and us making choices to have children at a later age. And so tell me and walk me through your journey with fertility.
Yeah, I totally agree that biology hasn't caught up to these shifts and these expectations. So I was working at Google at the time when I first even thought about anything with fertility, because when you're younger, there's all these messages about you don't want to get pregnant. So you're on birth control pills and you're using protection and doing all that stuff, right? So I hadn't even thought about this. And I still remember I was having dinner with a good friend of mine, and she was telling me that she was going to have her eggs frozen. And I was like, oh, why are you doing that? And she's like, Amy, we're getting old. Mind you, we're like 33 or 34 at the time. I'm like, I don't feel old. And she's like, well, according to studies, our eggs are losing their viability by the day. And so I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a significant other. Like, I don't even know when I'm going to get married, but I want kids. So I'm going to use this as my backup plan. I started thinking about it because of that conversation, and I started doing my own research, and it hit me, oh, I am old. And I started taking notice of what people were saying to me at that point. I think it's one of those like confirmation bias. Once you start thinking about something, you start hearing it more, where your focus is. And so I started just hearing all these people around me saying things to me about how I'm getting old, how I need to start having babies. Someone even told me your eggs are rotting. You need to
Oh my.
get serious about whether or not you're going to have babies or not. And mind you, at this time, I had dreams to go travel the world. I wanted to go quit my job and volunteer overseas, pursue my dream to travel, see the world before I settled down. Because once you have babies, it's hard to do that. And so there were these things that conflicted of settling down, starting a family. And I didn't even have a boyfriend, so I didn't know how I was going to settle down. And then there is this dream that I wanted to pursue. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to get my eggs frozen too. As I was embarking on that journey, I ended up dating a guy, and he was like, well, let's just make our embryos. So I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. So we had our embryos frozen, and that process, for anyone who's ever gone through IVF, pumping yourself full of hormones every night, stabbing yourself with those needles, it does a number on you. You don't feel like yourself. You're constantly tired. You're moody. I remember getting upset at my then boyfriend for leaving a buttered knife on the counter. And I was crying in tears because of it. And in my head, I knew this is not rational, but something about the hormones was shifting how I was thinking and how I was able to process stuff. So we had our embryos created, we froze them for later use. And a year later, on a Sunday, I got an email from the fertility center, and it essentially told me, your embryos were in a tank that lost nitrogen power. The viability of your embryos are now in question. We don't know if they're good until you plan to use it. And so this is really when I hit rock bottom, because this was supposed to be my backup plan. And now my backup plan is in question. So do I listen to what everyone says to, settle down, have babies, do the normal thing, or do I still pursue my dreams and risk not ever being able to have a family? And that felt like a lot of pressure. I ended up trying to do IVF again. And this time I only had one embryo instead of the first time I had three. And that was even more like in your face. You're getting old. You're not able to produce as much quality stuff anymore. And so that was a big challenge for me.
Well, one, that's devastating and so hard and painful to hear. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It's very, very brutal on the body. And I'll be honest, like I didn't go through IVF. I've had kids at a younger age and comparatively so. But I've had so many women come to my practice and they are going through the process. And it's like these seemingly little things that people have to think about, like who's going to shoot me up with the with the needle? Like, can you do it yourself? All these kinds of questions. And then the preparation that may or may not happen of your body is going to go through a war in terms of managing your emotions, managing the hormones, because if we think biologically, this was not the process hundreds of years ago. People weren't shooting themselves with hormones and having to freeze their eggs and things. I wanted to unpack that a little bit before we go into some of the healing process or going through that rock bottom, because I don't want to, gloss over that. Why do you think, in your perspective, companies are giving people these benefits of freezing their eggs, especially towards women as they see family planning happening at a later stage in life?
So many thoughts on that. I mean, one of the most obvious things, to give women choice and to also allow you to stay in the work that you're doing, stay in your career, move up the ladder, and to contribute to the company. At the end of the day, having you continue to work for the company and doing your work is great for the bottom line.
Sure. And taking maternity leave and all that, let's be honest, is not, right? And
it is not, especially at a company like Google where they give you, I forget, like 4 months, 5 months, something like that, right? And so you being out, they're not going to replace your job. They're going to have to figure out how to make it work. That's going to be a lot of work on all the people that are around you. And so hey, let's help the woman stay a little longer and do this at a later age. Because, the other thing is, once I actually did get pregnant and have my child, my perspective on work also shifted. So that's a risk for some companies.
Well, in my time, I don't think we're that different in age, but, for me going through graduate school and seeing many of the upper classmates having babies at the time, it was like this message like, oh my God, will we be compromising our career? Would it set us back from getting our degree? All those things are at play when we're making these decisions. And it's not something that many of us in the professional world, again, there's a privilege there, but something that we don't take lightly, because there's all these perceptions of being unproductive or lazy or slacking off. And it may take us several months to even disclose to people that we're pregnant, if people know themselves. Yeah. And so, but let's go back. So you got the news,
Yep.
that your embryos may or may not be viable. You kind of went to the phase they're likely not viable, right? So where did that leave you emotionally and mentally and physically?
I felt very, very alone. And I felt like a disappointment in many ways because as a woman, I grew up being taught as a good Chinese girl, like your job is to become a mother one day, to be to have children, to start a family, to care for your family. And even though I don't ascribe to that, there's still a part of me that wants to be a mother and to have my own children.
Sure.
And my husband has always wanted to have his own kids, right? So I was afraid of disappointing him. There was just so much emotion packed up in there. And as a Chinese woman brought up with very traditional Chinese parents, I was taught you have to save face. You don't share things. You don't air your dirty laundry. So I'm like, I am not going to go see a therapist. I'm not going to go get a coach. I'm not going to go talk to anybody else out there. I'm going to go figure this out on my own because I am smart enough to do so. I started reading books. I read every book out there, every Brene Brown book, like you name it, because I was so determined to figure out the answer of, do I start a family, listen to everyone and follow the script, or do I go pursue the dream of what I really want in life? And 8 months later, lots of books later, still didn't have the answer. My best friend then came to me and told me, hey, there's this thing called ayahuasca that I was reading about. Have you ever heard of ayahuasca?
I have actually, but please tell the listeners more about it.
So ayahuasca is essentially a medicinal plant. In Peru, they have huge ceremonies with a shaman. It's this black concoction made from mother ayahuasca, which is a root, or maybe it's a tree. I'm not sure.
It sounds like Black Panther, but let's
go. So, you drink it and it's a psychedelic, but it's supposed to give you healing properties, right? And so my friend told me, I was reading about this. It's supposed to give you clarity. And I'm like, that is exactly what I need. I need clarity. So I found a retreat down in Peru. Flew down to Peru for a 5-day ayahuasca ceremony. And I will tell you, I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about the power of vulnerability, of asking for help, of getting help. I just still didn't have that answer that I went in for, which is, do I have babies or do I go pursue my dreams? And I returned back to the US. A coworker started telling me about coaching. I had never heard about coaching before. And I got really curious about it. Found a coach. And honestly, I was a bit skeptical at first because I'm like, how can somebody who doesn't know me help me? That's also why I was skeptical with therapy. I'm like, I don't get how people could help me if they don't know me. But I was really, really desperate. So I got a coach and it was the best thing ever because it was this coach who helped me to peel back the layers and help me figure out 2 things. One is I'm going to regret it if I don't pursue my dreams. And even if I say I'm not in control of whether or not I can have babies, there are so many people dealing with this infertility. Like my backup plan is no longer a backup plan. So I'm just not in control of that. And the second thing that I realized is that it sucked to be stuck. And I want to be able to help people the way that my coach helped me. And that's actually how I started my journey of coaching.
Well, and it often leads to that, right? Personal experiences, professional experiences that really inspire us to help others. It's not for everybody. And there is this integrative, holistic approach that you are presenting. And, Amy and I are not advocating either way to take psychedelics. I work with individuals with substance use disorders. So by no means, folks, am I saying go take psychedelics to gain clarity. But I will say I'm big on integrative health. And so if you can kind of talk a little bit about the importance or like your approach to holistic health, that would be really great.
Yeah. I mean, I look at our well-being as many different parts. I used to think it was, let me just work out all the time. And, that's health, right? But there's so much there with mind, body, soul, all of that. On a daily basis, I meditate and I let my brain rest. I take time to play. I get out in nature. I get acupuncture. So it's just all of these little things that feed into my soul. I journal every single day and I do self-reflection. I go on my own retreats by myself to just work on me. And so it's really about figuring out what are the different parts that help you to heal.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through the journey though. You have a coach. You
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, yes, I should pursue my dreams. Where did that lead you?
I made that decision to leave my job. So I was at the prestigious Google where, my dad was so proud of me being there. He would hand out business cards with my name on it and tell people, this is where my daughter works. So when I told my parents, they were very unhappy, very disappointed in me. And it was one of the hardest decisions that I made. But in January of 2020, I sold all my belongings. And my husband and I quit our jobs. We took a one-way flight to Ghana to volunteer at a breast cancer nonprofit. And as you remember, that little thing called COVID came along in 2020. So our original plan was to volunteer for just 2 or 3 months and then go travel the world, which is our dream. And with COVID, Ghana ended up closing their borders. So we ended up stuck in Ghana for 7 months. Mm-hmm. And I always think there's a gift in every circumstance. Might not be obvious in the moment, but there's always a gift. And for me, getting stuck in Ghana was actually a gift because prior to that, my work life, I was on the road every other week. I was never home. I could never take care of myself. So this, holistic health piece, I wasn't taking care of myself. And in Ghana, that's when I started picking up all these different things that helped me to feel whole. And once borders reopened in September of 2020, my husband and I started living and working nomadically. And the year that we were turning 40, we said, we should probably start trying to have that child and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to look at option B. Mm-hmm. 2 months in, I got pregnant naturally. And so that's what brought me back to the US. And I find that it's funny how life happens. The thing that held me back was this fear of not being able to have a family and have a child. And the thing that brought me back was a baby, and he is now the healthiest, happiest 20-month-old.
Nice. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, it sounds like, managing your stress, prioritizing yourself, understanding what is important and what's consistent with that. And so, I don't ascribe necessarily to the mutually exclusive camp of you have to live your dreams or you have children. And I think what you're saying is that that's integrative too, is like, how do you also fulfill your dreams ongoing? Because maybe it is your son will be a world traveler as well. We take our daughters everywhere with mm-hmm. us. They're older now, but they've been traveling since they were very little. And so there's this idea that many people have to compromise who they are when they have children. Don't get me wrong. You will go MIA at many points in your social life. But there's this idea of really committing to being a family and, integrating the children into that dream. So there are many women, I keep saying that are struggling with fertility though. Like even when they try naturally, the IVF may, have 1 or 2 or 3 viable embryos or none. So what words of wisdom would you give those that are on that journey?
I will share the best piece of advice that I got on my own journey, which is don't focus on it so much. Because on my fertility journey, like I started reading all these books and I started trying to time when my fertility peak would be. I would measure my basal temperature, do all this stuff that I was told. And it was stressing me out, and it was stressing my husband out because, he felt like he was on a job, like, all right, yeah. I'm fertile. And the best advice that I got was from a fertility coach. And that person said to me, enjoy your relationship, go on dates, stop taking your temperature and just let it happen. Because the more you stress your body, the more your body is going to mm-hmm. think that you're in this fight, flight, freeze mode. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it won't want to carry a baby. So you need to find ways to relax, to enjoy your relationship. And yeah, that felt nicer too.
What can women and parents say to themselves in terms of self-compassion as well when they're going through this journey? Because it sounds like you start to internalize when it doesn't work, or when you're not like actually doing something like a task versus like sitting back.
It's not about you. There's nothing wrong with you. I think that was something that I had to also constantly remind myself of, that there's nothing wrong with you. Because a lot of times when fertility, there's struggles with fertility, infertility, people tend to blame themselves, like, oh, what's wrong with me? It's my fault, right? It is not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you.
Well, and I think the other part is going through biological tests and things like that. Sometimes it physically has nothing to do with you. It could be your possible partner. And so I think a lot of the times women also bear that burden of, oh, it must be because you can't bear children, or it must be because you don't have enough eggs. And so I think it is, if you do have a partner, really walking that journey together as well, and being open to exploring all the things that could be better together.
I'll also add that, I mentioned when the embryos, they became questionable, I was afraid of disappointing my husband. And what really, really helped both our relationship and our journey together was I opened up to him and I told him, I'm afraid of disappointing you because I know how much you want children. And he looked at me and he was like, seriously, you think I would not love you just because of this? Like, my love for you is not dependent on this. We will find other options. And we sat down to really talk about what are our options and what is most important to us. And at the end of the day, for both of us, we decided having a family is the most important thing. If we cannot have our own kids, there are so many kids out there that we could adopt. And so that became like what we stuck to as our North Star of, well, having a family is the most important thing. So either way, we're going to have a family, whether or not it's through having it ourselves or finding beautiful kids out there that need a home.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd also like to address is a lot of folks, once you find a partner or once they may commit to a long-term relationship, many people will say, when are you having kids? And I think it becomes a very sensitive topic. Many celebrities have talked about this, of it is very painful to have that question asked of them. How do you think people can approach this question without, they don't know. They don't know that you may be struggling, but how can people approach this question or kind of have more tact when they're talking about family planning with people?
So I've actually taken the approach of when people are, because right now I have one kid and a lot of people are asking me, when are you going to have your second?
Yeah.
And I straight up tell them, and it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. And I said, we're trying, we've been trying, we've had a few failed embryo transfers, but we're continuing to try. I'll let you know when it works. And that kind of gets people to stop, they stop asking because it makes them uncomfortable. And for people who don't feel as comfortable as I am just saying that to others when they ask, you can tell them it's something that is personal and I don't really want to be talking about it right now. And set those boundaries. Tell people, my boundary is I don't want to talk about it, so please stop asking me.
Sends a very clear message, and clear is kind.
It is. It's very kind. And for some reason, we feel like we can't set those boundaries, that we have to give in to other people's questions, and having your boundaries and knowing what they are and articulating it is okay.
And many people, like I mentioned, I have daughters, will come up and say, oh, you have two daughters. Are you going to try for a boy? I'm like, no, like I'm a feminist. I'm not going to try for a boy. And then my husband, is on the same page, but similar. He'll be like, what happens when people try to have a specific gendered child is that you're going to get the same gender as you already have. And so then you have three girls. not that that's a bad thing, but if your intent is to go in to have, a boy, it might not be likely. So unless, you do go the route of choosing the gender of your child,
Yeah,
with
that
IVF
was
and things.
that was my family. So my parents had two daughters and I was the accident child. And my dad said, this one has to be the girl. We're going to keep her and we're going to, it's got to be the son. And then out I come as a third girl. He's like, oh my gosh, three daughters.
Like, you're going to try for a fourth. It's like, come on, guys. Like,
Yeah.
and, some people end up with six girls and you're like, you clearly were trying and, you had to like call the game or whatever. So there's this other aspect of your life where you're coming out with the book. And I've talked to a lot of folks about the difficulty in talking with parents and the intergenerational trauma and all that stuff. So tell us a little bit more about your book and how that can kind of address relationships with parents.
Yeah. So my book is coming out September 28th. And it is called Unfinished Business: Breaking Down the Great Wall Between Adult Child and Immigrant Parents. And I started writing this book because probably around 3 years ago, I was working with a client. She's 55-year-old senior vice president at one of the largest banks in America. And by most standards, very, very successful. And she came to me because she wasn't happy in her career. So we started working together. And through our work, she discovered, I want to do something creative. I want to start my own business and go into the creative field. And as we start talking more, she said, but I can't until my dad passes away.
Oof.
And I said, what makes you think that? And she said, well, my father is a very traditional father, very traditional Chinese father, and he has expectations of me. And I go into little girl mode when I think about disappointing him, and I can't do that. And when we started talking about, well, can you have conversations with him about it? She said, no, I can't. I don't want to. He's going to mansplain me. He's going to criticize me. I can't. I started seeing this pattern among a lot of my Asian clients where they go into little boy, little girl mode, fear of disapproval. So I started wondering, well, what are those myths and stories that I have about my own parents? What are the things that I don't tell them, that I lie to them about? And I called my dad up and I said, hey, can I just talk to you and learn about your life and your journey? And at first he was a bit hesitant. He was like, well, I'm just a restaurant worker. I have nothing to tell you. My life's not interesting. You should talk to your uncle who's a lawyer. And I was like, well, I don't really want to know uncle's story. I want to know your story. And that just kind of goes to show how they view like your job title your and status. Whether you're worthy or not. So, but he finally agreed to have conversations with me. And I will say over the last 3 years, I was in probably 40 plus hours of conversation with him. The first 20 to 25 were really, really hard. Lots of tears, lots of anger, lots of resentment. And the other side of it now that I'm on this other side, I know what's possible because our relationship is completely different. So I mentioned I'm going through fertility treatments right now to try to have another kid. And my dad and my mom, they knew that I was going through the treatments. So I had one treatment in May that failed. And I was so afraid to tell them that it didn't work. Because with my sister, when she had a miscarriage, like probably around 7 years ago, they blamed her. They said, you must have done something to cause it. And when you have a failed IVF process, already, like it's already so emotional, you don't need somebody blaming you. So when my dad called me and said, hey, so when do you find out? How's the baby doing? I went into this mode where my entire body just clenched up. And I was like, in my head, should I lie? What should I say? I can't tell them the truth. And then I took a few breaths and I'm like, okay, I wrote this book. I've had these conversations with them. I have to be honest. So I said, Daddy, there's no baby. Didn't work. And I was ready for the criticism or whatever he was going to say. And he surprised me. He said, Amy, fate is funny in that way. Sometimes things work out. Sometimes they don't. And don't blame yourself for it. And I was like, my jaw dropped and I'm like, who are you?
He's grown.
Yeah. And I think that's the gift of these conversations is they're hard. They're not easy. I wanted to give up so many times. And if it wasn't for my husband, who constantly pushed me to keep going and, supported me when I would come home crying, I wouldn't have gotten through it. But I did. And now it's completely shifted my relationship with my parents.
It's beautiful. So where can folks learn more about the book and also your coaching business?
Yeah, so you can learn more on my website, amyyipcoaching.com. So that's AMYYIP coaching.com. You'll also find the book on there and where you can buy the book everywhere that sells books. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all of those places.
Amy, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing this very, very important topic. I'm absolutely sure that this is going to help so many out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Amy, for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with fertility and healing. Tune in next week as I talk with Dr. Preetma Dhillon Chatta about factors that contribute to stigma about seeking mental health care among South Asian communities, how the pandemic helped in reducing stigma, and how setting boundaries in some Asian households may be difficult.